Hey there, movie lovers. Welcome back to Rocky Watches Movies. Today we're taking a look back at 50 of our favourite facts from 50 movies we have covered on this channel. Whether it's a hilarious prank, visionary filmmaking, a movie tragedy, or just something bizarre, there's something for everyone. We have made this to celebrate reaching 50,000 subscribers, which we couldn't be happier about, and are eternally grateful to everyone who clicked that button. If you have a different favourite fact about these films, let us know in the comments. This is going to be a long one, folks, so grab a beer, relax, and let's look back at 50 amazing facts from 50 great movies. We'll get things started with Roadhouse. Kelly Lynch, who also starred in the 80s classic Cocktail, has revealed that her husband still gets teased about her Roadhouse sex scene with Patrick Swayze. In fact, his friend, actor Bill Murray, makes a point of phoning Lynch's husband of 3 decades every time he sees the scene. Hilarious. E.T. While E.T. is primarily a heartwarming tale of friendship, the presence of government agents armed with guns creates a sense of tension and danger. These weapons were intended to heighten the stakes and emphasize the family's fear. However, in the wake of increased gun violence, Spielberg opted to digitally remove the firearms from the 2002 re-release, replacing them with walkie-talkies. The decision sparked significant backlash, with critics and fans arguing that the alteration tampered with the cinematic classic. Many felt that films should be preserved as time capsules, reflecting the era in which they were created. In response to the negative feedback, Spielberg acknowledged his mistake and promised to maintain the original version in future releases. Time Bandits. Executive producer Dennis O'Brien initially objected to the explosive demise of Kevin's parents, prompting a creative standoff with director Terry Gilliam. O'Brien's reservations about the scene's violent nature were eventually overruled following a test screening for a young audience. The first kid who was asked what his favourite moment of the movie was excitedly said, "The parents being blown up," ultimately convincing O'Brien to keep the controversial ending. Animal House. Animal House is largely based on the wild college experiences of its writers, especially Chris Miller, a former fraternity member. Miller's real-life stories were often too extreme for the film, with many involving shocking acts of humiliation and degradation. Director John Landis was originally hired to supervise a rewrite of the script, which originally had only one fraternity of pigs, as Landis put it, but he added another so they could be good guys and bad guys. Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Sean Penn fully immersed himself in the role of Spicoli throughout the filming. His method acting went as far as demanding to be called by his character's name and ignoring his actual name. Amused by his dedication, or perhaps exasperation, the rest of the Fast Times cast took to calling him Sean De Niro behind his back. The Running Man. As Killian is congratulating his production team, he is standing next to a TV that is rolling credits for the show. The credits are quite easy to read on a large screen and are: thank you, Tim, George, Gary, Paul, Rob, Keith, you, me, us, them. What next? I don't know. Titles: Type M wrong. Makeup: Paint your face. Props: Property. Locations: Bite along here. Art director: Red G. Blur and Primary Colors. Music: Do Re Mi. Catering. How bizarre is that? Smokey and the Bandit. Sheriff Bufford T. Justice was more than just a fictional character. Burt Reynolds' father, who served as a police chief in Riviera Beach, Florida, mispronounced son of a bitch as some bitch, which he told to Jackie Gleason. He then went and used it in the film, and it became a signature line for the character. Planet of the Apes. John Chambers, the mastermind behind the ape makeup, had a fascinating background. Before making a name for himself in Hollywood, Chambers worked at a veterans hospital post-World War II, where he crafted prosthetics and facial restorations for wounded soldiers. His experience in this field later influenced his work in creating Spock's ears for Star Trek, and of course the groundbreaking ape prosthetics in Planet of the Apes. The Mask. The Mask wasn't always the wacky comedy we know and love. it actually has roots in a much darker comic series. The film is based on the Dark Horse comics of the same name, written by John Arcudi and illustrated by Doug Mank. In the comics, Stanley Ipkiss dons the mask and becomes a murderous maniac, often wielding deadly weapons like axes instead of the cartoonish mallets. According to screenwriter Mike Werb, the comic was very dark. Stanley ends up killing hundreds of people. The filmmakers chose to tone down the violence, giving us the more family-friendly version of the mask. Notably, Stanley's loyal dog Milo was created entirely for the film and doesn't appear in the comics. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Initially, the climactic squid battle was filmed against a peaceful sunset backdrop. However, the mechanical gears operating the squid were too visible, and it looked fake. Walt Disney visited the set, and director Fleischer told him about the problem. Disney then came up with the idea of having the squid battle take place during a fierce storm. Another story, though, is that it was actually screenwriter Earl Felton who came up with the idea, but whoever it was who thought of it had their idea become one of the film's most iconic moments. Blazing Saddles. Governor Le Pétomane, played by Mel Brooks himself, was named after a real-life French performer, known for his flatulence artistry. Le Pétomane, which roughly translates to farter maniac, was famous in the 19th century for his ability to pass gas in musical rhythms on stage. Impressive. The Blues Brothers. John Belushi's struggles with drug addiction were no secret, and sadly, he passed away in 1982 from a lethal combination of heroin and cocaine. Belushi's meteoric rise to fame after Animal House intensified his drug use, and it became a major issue during the production of The Blues Brothers. The film often fell behind schedule because Belushi would disappear from the set or fail to show up altogether. Dan Aykroyd later revealed that part of the movie's budget was allocated specifically for cocaine to keep the night shoots going. John Landis recalled an incident where he had to flush Belushi's cocaine down the toilet, leading to an angry confrontation. Fortunately, they patched things up quickly, but it highlighted the challenges they faced working with Belushi during this period. Spaceballs. Long before Spaceballs hit the big screen, there was Hardware Wars from 1977, a 12-minute parody made by amateur filmmaker Ernie Facilius. Shot for a mere $8,000 in an old laundromat, the short film hilariously replaced the spaceships with household appliances like toasters and tin foil. Despite the shoestring budget, Hardware Wars grossed around $500,000 and even caught the attention of George Lucas, who called it a cute little film. Facilius, however, wasn't too happy with Spaceballs, claiming that Mel Brooks borrowed heavily from his work. The Cannonball Run. The fast-paced, dangerous stunts in the Cannonball Run weren't without real-life consequences. Stuntwoman Heidi Von Beltz was injured after a stunt involving an Aston Martin went wrong. The car, which had no seatbelts installed, crashed into an ambulance, leaving Von Beltz paralysed. The incident led to significant legal battles and raised questions about safety standards in stunt work. In fact, her lawsuit against the producers led to required seatbelt use in all stunt cars and caused the Directors Guild to prohibit directors from altering stunts on location. Big Trouble in Little China. The original script by Gary Goldman and David D. Weinstein was actually a western set in 1899. Jack Burton was originally a cowboy in San Francisco's Chinatown, facing off against the film's villains. This early Jack Burton was a sharpshooter who could shoot a kite out of the sky, but struggled in hand-to-hand combat. When W.D. Richter came in to rewrite, he shifted the action to a modern setting, believing that grounding it in a familiar contemporary city would better connect with audiences. It took him 10 weeks to adapt the script. Bullitt. There are conflicting reports online about who was driving throughout the car chase scene, with some saying it was shared between Steve McQueen and stunt driver Bud Ekins. They report that when McQueen is driving, the rear view mirror is down, reflecting his face. When Ekins is driving, it is up, so his face is hidden. But in an interview, cinematographer William A. Fraker has stated that McQueen did all his own driving except for the last shot where the car skids into a ditch. McQueen apparently made a point to keep his head near the open car window so that audiences would be reassured that it was he, not a stuntman, who was driving. A Clockwork Orange. One of the most famous scenes in the film, where Alex gleefully sings Singing in the Rain while violently assaulting a couple, was largely improvised. During rehearsal, Kubrick felt the scene wasn't working and wanted McDowell to do something spontaneous. McDowell started humming and eventually burst into Singing in the Rain. Kubrick loved the contrast between the cheerful song and the brutal violence, and bought the rights to the song immediately. McDowell later said that the idea worked because Singing in the Rain represents pure happiness, which was exactly what Alex was feeling during his violent spree. Caddyshack. The explosion that blows up the gopher holes was cheekily done. The owners of Rolling Hills Golf Club didn't actually give permission for it. They were concerned about potential damage to the property, but producer John Peters had a crafty solution. He arranged a fancy dinner and scenic boat ride for the club's owners, distracting them long enough for the crew to set off the explosive scene in secret. The golf course survived and the scene became a comedic classic. Deliverance. Even for Deliverance, some stunts seemed too risky, including a scene where Burt Reynolds' character Lewis goes over a waterfall. Director John Boorman originally planned to use a dummy, but Reynolds thought it looked unconvincing and volunteered to perform the stunt himself. Despite his enthusiasm, Reynolds ended up with a broken coccyx from the impact, and when he asked Boorman how it looked, Boorman dryly replied, "Like a dummy going over a waterfall." The good, the bad, and the ugly. To achieve as much authenticity as possible, Sergio Leone undertook detailed research on the American Civil War, even traveling to the US to consult Library of Congress archives and study Civil War-era photographs by Matthew Brady, the father of photojournalism. But the depiction of the battles isn't considered to be very historically accurate. Like many fictional works, it takes creative liberties with historical details to enhance the drama. One instance would be the Gatling gun, which was around during the Civil War, but it wasn't used in 1862 or in New Mexico, where this is set. Die Hard. To achieve the hyperrealism that the director was aiming for, the blanks used in the guns in Die Hard were specially modified to be extra loud. In one scene, Bruce Willis shoots a terrorist through a table, placing him in extremely close proximity to the gunfire. This resulted in permanent hearing loss for the actor. Willis said in an interview, "Due to an accident on the first Die Hard, I suffered 2/3 partial hearing loss in my left ear and have a tendency to say, 'What?'" Airplane. A scene involving blind Polish airline pilots was written and filmed, featuring blind singer Jose Feliciano and lookalikes of blind singers Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder playing Polish pilots. However, the scene sparked protests from the Polish-American League. After considering the controversy, the writer-directors decided that the scene wasn't funny enough to warrant inclusion in the film, and ultimately cut it. Duel. Spielberg wasn't pleased when a lot of footage of the vehicles was reused in an episode of The Incredible Hulk, titled "Never Give a Trucker an Even Break." While the recycled footage was completely legal, since the show was also produced by Universal, it left Spielberg infuriated. If you watch the episode, it is basically Duel, but with Bill Bixby playing David Mann. They used so much footage from the movie, it's a complete rip-off. Following this, Spielberg insisted that all his contracts protect shots from his movies being used as stock footage. Christmas Vacation. Similar to the 1983 original, Christmas Vacation is inspired by a short story, Christmas 59, written by John Hughes for National Lampoon in December 1980. The film gives a nod to its literary origins when Clark gets trapped in the attic and discovers a box of old home movies, one of which is labelled Christmas 59. You might notice though that when Clark watches the film, the title actually reads Christmas 55. Jaws 2. Director John D. Hancock's interpretation of Amity Island, the setting for the first two Jaws films, was notably bleak. In stark contrast to the vibrant and lively town portrayed in the original, Hancock envisioned a community in decline, still reeling from the aftermath of the shark attacks. However, the producers were dissatisfied with Hancock's dark approach. He was dismissed just a month into production. French director Jeannot Jouac was then brought in to take over and ultimately completed the film. Ace Ventura. The infamous ass-talking began on In Living Color. One day, frustrated by Keenan Ivory Wayans' constant rejection of his sketches, Jim Carrey stood up and read a sketch from his backside, directed at Wayans. The two nearly got into a fight before Wayans stormed out of the room. Wayans went on to say, "Later we sat down, talked, and everything was cool." Ghostbusters. Struggling to get their ghost removal business off the ground in New York City, the future Ghostbusters took a gamble on a television commercial. Their ad, featuring the phone number 555-2368, promised to tackle all your supernatural woes. Director Ivan Reitman had a surprise in store for moviegoers in 1984. That same commercial actually aired during the film's theatrical release. People watching could pick up the phone and dial the number. What they heard? A pre-recorded message from Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd themselves, apologising for not being able to answer. They were too busy busting ghosts. The stunt was a massive success. The Ghostbusters' phone line received a staggering 1,000 calls every hour, 24 hours a day for weeks. Unfortunately, for those hoping for a spectral showdown, the line is no longer operational. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Most of the number plates used in Ferris Bueller's Day Off are designed to incorporate the names of previous John Hughes films. These include Ferris's mum's car, VCTN, for National Lampoon's Vacation, Jeannie's car, TBC, for The Breakfast Club, Ferris's dad's car, MMOM, for Mr. Mom, and Rooney's car, 4FBDO, for Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Cameron's father's Ferrari is the exception, but it spells out nervous due to Cameron's anxiety. Flash Gordon. Brian Blessed, a recipient of the Order of the British Empire for his contributions to the arts and charity, claimed a special place for Flash Gordon in the heart of the British royal family. The actor fondly recalled the film being a holiday favourite at Buckingham Palace, often enjoyed by Queen Elizabeth II and her grandchildren. A particularly memorable encounter occurred when the Queen personally requested a reenactment of Blessed's iconic line, "Gordon's alive!" Mad Max. The version released in the US was redubbed with American accents. "I'm a fuel-injected suicide machine." It has been widely claimed that the distributor, American International Pictures, feared that American audiences would have had problems understanding the thick Australian accent spoken by the actors. Now, I can understand them subtitling Scottish films like Trainspotting, but Aussie flicks? That's a bit bizarre. Raiders of the Lost Ark. George Lucas's dog, an Alaskan Malamute, was named Indiana, in honour of his canine companion, and taking inspiration from a 1966 Steve McQueen movie called Nevada Smith, Lucas named his new character Indiana Smith. Spielberg cited the similarities to the McQueen film and requested a name change, but did agree the surname should be as commonplace as Smith. Lucas and writer Lawrence Kasdan suggested Jones, and Spielberg was on board. Blade. Blade features many memorable vampires, but none quite like Pearl, the giant vampire tortured by Blade with a UV light. An earlier draft of the screenplay revealed that Pearl's enormous size resulted from his addiction to eating children and infants, particularly relishing their hearts. To emphasize this, Pearl's lair was initially intended to be strewn with the corpses of his victims, with stray hearts scattered across the floor. However, this concept was deemed too dark and was ultimately scrapped. Eric Edwards, the actor who portrayed Pearl, mentioned that in one draft they even considered placing a young boy across his stomach. Jaws. Jaws was a game changer for how Hollywood released films. Before it, movie studios favoured a slow and steady approach, gradually rolling out films across the country. Jaws, however, chomped into that tradition. It premiered on a massive 464 screens in June, right at the start of summer, and quickly expanded to 700 screens by July, fueled by excited word of mouth. This wide summer release, capitalizing on buzz and perfect timing, is now the blueprint for Hollywood blockbusters. Jaws didn't just scare audiences, it invented the summer blockbuster season. The Exorcist. A real-life suspected serial killer makes an appearance in The Exorcist. Paul Bateson, a real X-ray technician, played the role of the radiologist's assistant in the scene where Reagan is having a procedure. In 1979, Bateson was arrested for the brutal murder of a film critic. While awaiting trial, he bragged about killing other men, claiming he disposed of their bodies in the Hudson River. These unsolved murders, known as the Bag Murders, targeted gay men in the late 70s. Despite a confession, authorities couldn't link Bateson to the other killings. He served over 20 years for the critic's murder and was released in 2004. The Terminator. To leave a lasting impression at the pitch meeting, James Cameron pulled out a stop unlike any other. He enlisted actor Lance Henriksen, his collaborator from Piranha 2: The Spawning, to embody the Terminator, a character yet to be cast. Henriksen, clad in a ripped shirt, a weathered leather jacket and combat boots, stormed into the studio office, his teeth glinting with makeshift gold foil. This unconventional introduction, orchestrated by Cameron, grabbed the attention of John Day, head of Hemdale Pictures, a low-budget studio. Day, impressed by both the audacious presentation and Cameron's pitch, greenlit the Terminator with a modest budget of $6 million. Halloween. The script offered little description for Michael Myers' mask, simply calling for the pale, natural features of a man. In a stroke of budgetary brilliance, production designer Tommy Lee Wallace found 2 cheap latex masks at a local toy store, both painted white for a mere $2 each. One was a distorted Captain Kirk mask from Star Trek, the other a replica of Emmett Kelly's clown character, Weary Willie. Carpenter, drawn to the unsettling blankness it conveyed, opted for the modified Kirk mask, unknowingly creating a horror icon in the process. The Lost Boys. The posters adorning the walls weren't just set dressing. They held hidden messages. In the vampire's lair hung a Doors poster, a nod to their anthem, People Are Strange. Countering this, Sam's room featured a poster for Echo and the Bunnymen, the band who provided the film's hauntingly beautiful cover of the same song. Finally, a Rob Lowe poster graced Sam's closet door, a cheeky in-joke for director Joel Schumacher, who had just directed Lowe in St. Elmo's Fire. The Phantom Menace. Believe it or not, Michael Jackson was interested in playing Jar Jar Binks. He even approached George Lucas about the role. However, Jackson envisioned portraying the character through prosthetics and makeup, similar to his iconic Thriller transformation. Lucas, on the other hand, had chosen to create Jar Jar entirely with CGI animation. This difference in creative vision ultimately led Lucas to cast Ahmed Best for the role. In my opinion, anything would have been better than what we got. Psycho. The iconic shower scene in Psycho is also a marvel of technical ingenuity. To achieve a dramatic downpour without getting the camera wet, the crew constructed a 6-foot showerhead specifically outfitted to spray around the lens. For the blood, chocolate syrup was used, as this proved far more effective in black and white than traditional fake blood. Enter the Dragon. Apparently, Jim Kelly had an insatiable appetite for the ladies, and the leisures being a film star provided, with Hong Kong being his playground. According to producer Paul Heller, Jim Kelly screwed everything that moved and ended up in hospital with bloated testicles. A harness for him to hang over the acid pit for his death scene could no longer be worn because he was so sore, so they had to specially make a cargo net for him. Temple of Doom. While filming the scene where Indiana Jones is bound by the thuggy cult, the crew decided to lighten the mood with a now legendary practical joke on Harrison Ford. Instead of the expected bad guy, Barbara Streisand emerged, clad in a dominatrix outfit. She whipped Ford, saying, "That's for Hanover Street, the worst movie I ever saw." She even whipped him for making too much money from Star Wars. The surprise didn't end there, though. Carrie Fisher then joined the scene, playfully rescuing Ford from Streisand's clutches. It's a shame the video is of such low quality. The Crow. Since Brandon Lee died before the film's completion, a visual effects company was brought in to finish some crucial shots. They used previously filmed footage of Lee stumbling down an alley and then superimposed it into a shot of the door to create the scene of him entering his abandoned loft. Lee's stuntman, Chad Stahelski, who would, by the way, go on to direct all the John Wick films, was used as a body double to get the shot of Eric walking up to the window and looking out over the city. They then digitally added Brandon Lee's face onto the shot. For the shot where Eric Draven stands in front of a shattered mirror in his apartment, they composited another image of Lee with a map of the mirror to create the effect. Predator. The Predator's first incarnation fell short of terrifying. The initial design resembled an awkward bug-eyed insect, leaving director John McTiernan unimpressed. Determined to achieve a more menacing creature, McTiernan made a bold decision, halting production for a complete redesign. Arnold Schwarzenegger recommended the talents of special effects legend Stan Winston, the mastermind behind his iconic cyborg endoskeleton in The Terminator. Superman the movie. Before Richard Donner met Marlon Brando, he asked Hollywood agent Jay Cantor for any negotiating hints, at which point he learned that Brando was going to attempt to do as little work as possible. He then called Francis Coppola. He said, "He's brilliant. He's got a brilliant mind, but he loves to talk. Keep him talking, and he'll talk himself out of any problem." The story then goes that when the director actually met with Brando, the actor proposed that he played Jor-El as a bagel. Brando reasoned that no one knows what the people on Krypton look like. Fighting to secure his star, Donner invoked Superman's long comic book history and told him that there isn't a kid in the world that doesn't know what Jor-El looks like, and he looks like Marlon Brando. Brando looked at him and smiled and said, "I talk too much, don't I?" He said, "Okay, show me the wardrobe." Porky's. Director Bob Clark revealed that he drew inspiration for the characters in Porky's from his own teenage and college years. He identified most closely with Pee-wee, Billy, and Tommy, the film's intellectual trio. Other characters were based on real-life friends and people from Clark's high school and college days. Stand By Me. Following the film's completion, director Rob Reiner screened Stand By Me for author Stephen King. King reportedly praised the adaptation, acknowledging it as the first truly successful translation of his work to the big screen. He even commended Reiner for the creative decision to have Gordy pick up the gun instead of Chris, a detail King himself admitted he wished he'd included in the original story. Back to the Future. It's hard to imagine the iconic Back to the Future without the time-travelling DeLorean. The original script, however, had a very different vision for this essential plot device. Instead of a sleek, futuristic car, Doc Brown's time machine was initially conceived as an old refrigerator-like time chamber. The eccentric inventor would have had to lug this cumbersome appliance around on the back of his truck, a far cry from the glamorous image we know today. The Evil Dead. While the Steadicam was released prior to Sam Raimi creating The Evil Dead, Raimi didn't have enough money to use the camera stabilizer in his film. Instead, Raimi created the shaky cam technique, which gave The Evil Dead its unique look. A few different rigs were built to produce creative movements, including the shaky cam, the Ramo cam, and the Vasa cam. The iconic shot of the evil floating through the woods was created by attaching the camera to a wooden board and then having two people run while holding onto the board. Additionally, the Ramo cam was built to smash windows with a T-bar before the camera went through them. and the Vasocam used Vaseline and a sawhorse to create a smooth tracking movement. Titanic. The final days of shooting the present-day Titanic scenes in Halifax, Canada, were marked by a bizarre and terrifying incident. As the crew prepared to depart for the massive Titanic set in Mexico, a celebratory meal took a sinister turn. A bowl of chowder laced with PCP was unknowingly consumed by dozens of cast and crew members, including director James Cameron himself. The powerful hallucinogenic drug plunged the group into a chaotic ordeal. While no one was permanently harmed, the incident caused widespread panic and confusion. Despite suspicions falling on a disgruntled former crew member, the culprit behind the poisoning was never identified. Weird science. At just 14 at the time of shooting, Elan Mitchell-Smith became the envy of millions, young and old alike, thanks to the scene in which he gets to kiss Kelly LeBrock full on the lips. He got a bit carried away though, and wound up sticking his tongue in LeBrock's mouth. Naturally, LeBrock, who was 24 at the time, was taken aback by this, causing her to warn Mitchell-Smith, "If you ever do that again, I'm gonna kick your ass." One suspects that serious questions would be asked about an underage actor performing such a scene with a significantly older woman today. But this is one of those many things shrugged off in the 80s. And there you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks again to everyone who has subscribed and all those who watch our content. If you haven't subscribed yet, the button is right there. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.